The principal's son. Thaddeus Merrick stood at the entrance of Lincoln High School on a muggy August morning, his worn backpack slung over one shoulder, watching the flood of students pour through the double doors with practiced indifference. The building loomed before him, all red brick and institutional white trim, a sprawling complex that housed nearly 2,000 students in the heart of suburban Ohio. He'd spent the previous week walking these halls alone, while his father coordinated with the administrative staff, learning the layout, memorizing the quickest routes between buildings, identifying the quiet corners where someone could disappear during lunch. Nobody had noticed him then. He preferred it that way. His father had made the request explicit the night before they moved into their modest rental house 3 blocks from campus. "Don't tell anyone who I am." Not yet. "Let me establish my authority first, and you establish yourself as just another student. It'll be better for both of us." Thaddeus understood the reasoning. Being the new principal's kid would paint a target on his back or create a barrier of false friendliness, neither of which appealed to him. So he'd agreed, and now he carried that secret like a stone in his pocket, heavy and ever-present. The morning bell echoed across the courtyard, and Thaddeus merged into the stream of bodies flowing toward the main building. He was slight for his height, all sharp angles and narrow shoulders, with dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that let him hide behind it when necessary. His clothes were clean, but unremarkable: jeans from Target, a plain grey t-shirt, sneakers that had seen better days. Nothing about him suggested wealth or status or any reason to pay attention. That was intentional. He'd learned in his previous school that blending in was a survival skill, and the last 2 years had taught him that being invisible was often safer than being seen. His locker was on the 2nd floor, number 247, wedged between a dented blue one covered in band stickers and a pristine red one that clearly belonged to someone organized. He worked the combination slowly, still getting used to the mechanism, when he felt the first shoulder bump, not hard enough to knock him over, but deliberate enough to make him stumble. He caught himself against the locker, heard the laughter behind him, and didn't turn around. His father's words echoed, "Establish yourself as just another student. Don't make waves, don't draw attention." "Watch where you're standing, freshman," a voice drawled, thick with manufactured boredom. Thaddeus registered the insult. He wasn't a freshman, he was a junior, but correcting them would only invite more attention. He focused on his locker, pulling out the materials for first-period American history. "Dude doesn't even talk," another voice added, this one higher, more nasal. "What, you mute or something?" Thaddeus closed his locker carefully, shouldered his backpack, and walked away without acknowledging them. He felt their stares on his back, heard the whispered comments that followed him down the hallway. New kid, weird, scared, let them think what they wanted. He had 8 months of this left before graduation, and then he'd be gone to wherever college would take him. 8 months of invisibility seemed achievable if he just kept his head down. American history was taught by Mrs. Patterson, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses perpetually perched on the end of her nose, and a passion for the Revolutionary War that bordered on obsessive. Thaddeus took a seat near the back, by the windows, where he could watch the football field and the parking lot beyond. The classroom filled slowly, students claiming their territory with the casual territoriality of people who'd known each other for years. He recognized a few faces from the hallway, including the guy who'd bumped him, a broad-shouldered athlete with the kind of confident swagger that came from never being told no. The guy caught Thaddeus's eye and smirked, then turned away to joke with his friends. Mrs. Patterson launched into a lecture about taxation without representation, and Thaddeus took notes mechanically, his handwriting neat and precise. He'd always been good at school, the kind of student teachers liked, because he didn't cause trouble and turned in his work on time. It was another form of invisibility, being the quiet kid who performed adequately, but never drew too much praise or concern. He could feel eyes on him occasionally. The new kid was still a curiosity for the first few days, but he kept his gaze fixed on his notebook. At lunch, he claimed a table in the far corner of the cafeteria, away from the prime real estate near the windows, where the popular kids held court. The cafeteria was massive, able to accommodate 500 students at once, with long tables arranged in rows and a serving line that stretched along the entire west wall. The noise was overwhelming at first, a cacophony of voices and laughter and the clatter of trays, but Thaddeus had learned to tune it out. He unwrapped the sandwich he'd packed that morning, turkey and cheese on wheat, nothing fancy, and pulled out a paperback novel he'd been reading, a science fiction story about colonizing Mars. He made it through 3 pages before someone knocked his water bottle off the table. It hit the floor with a plastic crack, water spreading across the tile in a clear puddle. Thaddeus looked up to see the same guy from the hallway, flanked now by 2 others. Up close, he could see the letterman jacket, the Lincoln High School logo embroidered over the left breast. Football, most likely. The guy's name was probably something like Tyler or Brandon, one of those names that fit perfectly with the square jaw and the easy confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "Whoops," the guy said, not bothering to hide his grin. "Didn't see that there." Thaddeus bent down, picked up the bottle, and set it back on the table without comment. He'd learned that responses only escalated situations. Silence was often the best defense. "Dude seriously doesn't talk," one of the flanking guys said, this one with a shock of red hair and a face full of freckles. "That's weird, man." "Maybe he's just shy," the leader said, and the word dripped with mockery. "That it, new kid? You shy?" Thaddeus returned his attention to his book, willing them to get bored and leave. His heart hammered in his chest, adrenaline spiking despite his outward calm, but he kept his hands steady on the pages. After a long moment, he heard them walk away, their laughter trailing behind them like exhaust fumes. The rest of lunch passed without incident, but Thaddeus could feel the weight of their attention even from across the cafeteria. He'd been marked now, identified as an easy target. The realization settled over him with grim familiarity. This was how it always started. The following morning arrived with heavy grey clouds and the promise of rain. Thaddeus walked to school instead of accepting his father's offer of a ride. Maintaining the fiction of separation required these small sacrifices. His father had left early anyway, arriving at the building by 6:30 to handle the endless administrative tasks that came with running a school this size. They'd barely seen each other the previous evening, his father buried in paperwork at the kitchen table while Thaddeus finished homework in his room upstairs. The house felt temporary still. Boxes unpacked in the corners, furniture arranged with the haphazard efficiency of people who weren't sure they'd stay. At his locker, Thaddeus found the first piece of graffiti. Someone had written MUTE in black Sharpie across the metal door, the letters large enough to be visible from down the hallway. He stared at it for a long moment, then opened the locker and began gathering his books. A few students glanced his way, registered the vandalism and looked away quickly. Nobody said anything. Nobody offered to help. This too was familiar, the way people averted their eyes from cruelty, unwilling to get involved, protecting themselves first. In English class, he found himself assigned to a group project with 3 other students, 2 girls, and a guy he didn't recognize. The girls exchanged glances when the teacher announced the groupings, clearly unimpressed with having to work with the new kid, but they were polite enough when they gathered their desks together. The guy, tall and thin with wire-rimmed glasses, introduced himself as Devon and actually extended a hand for Thaddeus to shake. "I'm Thaddeus," he said quietly, accepting the handshake. His voice sounded strange after a day and a half of silence, rough from disuse. "Oh, he does talk," one of the girls said, Sophie, according to her enthusiastic self-introduction. She had blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and a smile that seemed genuine. I was starting to wonder. The project was an analysis of metaphor in contemporary poetry, and they spent the period dividing up the work and exchanging email addresses. Thaddeus relaxed fractionally. Maybe not everyone here was hostile. Maybe there were pockets of normalcy he could find if he just navigated carefully. That fragile hope shattered in the parking lot after school. Thaddeus had stayed late in the library, working on the English project, and avoiding the rush of students flooding toward the buses and cars. By the time he emerged, the sun was slanting low through the clouds, painting everything in shades of amber and grey. He was halfway across the parking lot when he heard the footsteps behind him, too many for one person, too quick to be casual. "Hey, mute!" He kept walking, gripping the straps of his backpack tighter. "I'm talking to you, new kid." The voice was closer now, and Thaddeus could hear the edge in it, the anticipation. He walked faster, the school's edge just 30 yards away now, the street beyond that, safety if he could just reach it. They caught him at the fence line, 3 of them, the leader whose name he still didn't know, the redhead, and a third guy with dark hair and a nose that looked like it had been broken more than once. They circled him loosely, casual predators testing prey. "What's your problem, man?" the leader asked, and his tone was conversational, almost friendly. "We try to talk to you. You just ignore us. That's rude." "I'm just trying to go home," Thaddeus said, keeping his voice level. "Don't escalate. Don't engage. Get through this and walk away." "Just trying to go home," the redhead mimicked in a high-pitched whine, and the others laughed. "Poor baby wants to go home." "You think you're better than us?" the leader asked, stepping closer. "Too good to talk to us." "I don't think anything," Thaddeus said. "I'm just new here. I don't know anyone yet." "You're new," the leader agreed, "which means you need to learn how things work around here. There's a social order, you understand? And you?" He jabbed a finger toward Thaddeus's chest without actually touching him. "You're at the bottom. Way at the bottom. So when we talk to you, you respond. You show some respect." Thaddeus nodded slowly, calculating. 3 against 1, all of them bigger, the school emptying out behind them. No teachers in sight, no witnesses who mattered. "Okay," he said simply. The leader blinked, apparently surprised by the easy acquiescence. "Okay?" "Okay, I understand." "You understand," the leader repeated, then looked at his friends with exaggerated disbelief. "He understands. Did you guys hear that? He understands." He turned back to Thaddeus. "What's your name, anyway?" "Thaddeus." "Thaddeus," the leader said, drawing it out mockingly. "What kind of name is that? That's like a old man name. That's like a butler name. Hey guys, this is Thaddeus the butler." More laughter, harsh and bright in the empty parking lot. Thaddeus said nothing, just waited. Eventually they'd get bored. Eventually they'd leave. "My name's Connor," the leader said, and there it was, the introduction that formalized the dynamic. "Connor Walsh. My dad's a lawyer, big deal around here. Probably heard of him, Walsh and Associates? Yeah, so you'll be seeing a lot of me and my friends here, Jackson," he indicated the redhead, "and Marcus," the third guy nodded curtly. "We basically run this school, just so you know who you're dealing with." Thaddeus registered the name Marcus with distant irony, one of the names explicitly on the list of names to avoid in his father's orientation materials for staff, probably because there were 3 Marcuses in every grade and it got confusing. But that hardly mattered now. "Can I go?" Thaddeus asked. Connor studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside with a mocking bow. "Sure, Thaddeus the butler. You can go. But remember what we talked about, yeah? Social order. Respect." Thaddeus walked past them, feeling their eyes on his back, expecting a shove or a kick or something worse. But they let him go, satisfied with having established dominance. He made it to the street, turned the corner, and only then allowed his shoulders to drop, his breathing to deepen. The encounter had lasted maybe 5 minutes. It felt like an hour. At home, his father was already in his study, door closed, voice audible through the wood as he talked on the phone with someone from the district office. Thaddeus went upstairs, dropped his backpack in his room, and stood at the window looking out at the street. 3 houses down, a family was having a barbecue, smoke rising from a grill, children playing in the yard. Normal life happening all around him while he stood apart from it. His phone buzzed with a text from his mum, still in Boston finishing up her own work contract before she joined them in Ohio. "How's school?" it asked, followed by a heart emoji. "Fine," he typed back. "Making friends." The lie came easily. The week ground forward with a rhythm that quickly became routine. Connor and his friends found excuses to interact with Thaddeus daily, shoulder checks in the hallway, books knocked from his hands, whispered insults as they passed. Nothing overt enough to warrant teacher intervention, nothing obvious enough to be called out, just a constant low-level harassment that ground away at his composure like sandpaper on skin. In English class, the group project progressed smoothly. Sophie and the other girl, Hannah, both proved to be genuinely friendly, including Thaddeus in their discussions, and actually listening when he made suggestions. Devon was quiet, but thoughtful, often catching nuances in the poetry that the others missed. Thaddeus found himself looking forward to English, the one period where he felt like he could breathe. "You're really good at this," Sophie said on Thursday, reviewing his analysis of a Mary Oliver poem. They were working in the library, a space with high ceilings and rows of books that muffled sound and created pockets of privacy. "Like, really good. Have you written much?" Thaddeus shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I read a lot. I guess that helps." "Well, it shows," Hannah added, leaning over to read his work. This stuff about the metaphor of wild geese representing freedom from social expectations. That's college-level analysis. He felt warmth creep up his neck, a flush of pleasure he hadn't experienced in months. "Thanks." "So where'd you move from?" Devon asked, pushing his glasses up his nose. It was the first personal question anyone had asked him. "Massachusetts? Boston suburbs? My dad got a new job out here?" "What's he do?" Thaddeus hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "He works in education, administration stuff." It wasn't technically a lie. Devon nodded, satisfied, and they returned to discussing the project. But Thaddeus felt the weight of the omission, the deliberate vagueness. How long could he maintain this fiction? How long before someone made the connection? That afternoon, Connor escalated. Thaddeus was at his locker, swapping books between periods, when he felt the shove from behind. He stumbled forward, his forehead connecting with the metal door with a hollow thunk that sent stars exploding across his vision. Pain bloomed bright and sharp, and he caught himself with one hand, breathing through the initial shock. "Oops," Connor's voice came from behind him. "Didn't see you there, Thad. You okay, buddy?" Thaddeus touched his forehead, felt the beginnings of what would be a spectacular bruise, and turned slowly. Connor stood there with Jackson and Marcus, all three wearing expressions of exaggerated concern. A small crowd had gathered, students slowing to watch, that particular electricity in the air that came before violence. "I'm fine," Thaddeus said quietly. "You sure?" That looked like it hurt. "Maybe you should be more careful, standing so close to your locker like that. Someone could get hurt." The threat was implicit and clear. Thaddeus could see teachers down the hallway, but none close enough to have witnessed the shove, and even if they had, would they intervene? Or would they pretend not to see, the way teachers so often did, unwilling to confront students or their influential parents? "I'll be more careful," Thaddeus said, and he heard the hollowness in his own voice. Connor leaned in close, his breath hot against Thaddeus's ear. "That's right, Thad. You be more careful, because accidents happen all the time around here. All the time." He pulled back with a grin, clapped Thaddeus on the shoulder hard enough to hurt, and walked away with his entourage. The crowd dispersed, disappointed there hadn't been more drama. Thaddeus finished at his locker, gathered his books, and walked to chemistry with his head throbbing. In the bathroom mirror before class, he examined the damage, a red welt already darkening to purple, centered on his forehead. He'd have to explain this to his father tonight, and the thought filled him with a complicated mix of shame and anger. Shame that he hadn't fought back, hadn't defended himself. Anger that he'd been put in this position at all. But what was the alternative? Tell his father. Let the principal handle it? That would only confirm Connor's eventual suspicions and make everything worse. The bullying would become more careful, more subtle, and Thaddeus would be marked forever as the principal's kid who couldn't fight his own battles. No, he had to handle this himself, had to endure it, and hope Connor got bored and moved on to easier targets. The weekend brought relief. 48 hours without the constant vigilance of school. Thaddeus spent Saturday helping his father unpack boxes in the garage, organizing tools and sports equipment from their previous house. His father noticed the bruise immediately, of course. "What happened there?" he asked, nodding toward Thaddeus's forehead while handing him a box labeled winter clothes. "Walked into my locker," Thaddeus said, not meeting his eyes. "Wasn't paying attention." His father studied him for a long moment, and Thaddeus could feel the weight of that gaze, the professional assessment. His father had been a principal for 15 years, had worked in 3 different schools, had seen every kind of teenage drama and trauma imaginable. He knew what bullying looked like, but he also knew his son had asked for space to handle things on his own terms. "That's going to bruise pretty dramatically," his father said finally, setting down the box he was holding. "You should ice it tonight." "I will." They worked in silence for a while, the garage slowly taking shape around them. Finally, his father spoke again, his voice careful. "You know, if you're having trouble at school, trouble adjusting, we can talk about it. I can help quietly. Nobody needs to know." "I know," Thaddeus said. "I'm fine." "Really? It's just the usual new kid stuff. It'll pass." His father nodded, but the concern didn't leave his eyes. "Okay, but the offer stands, always." Sunday brought rain, heavy and persistent, drumming against the windows and turning the backyard into a muddy swamp. Thaddeus spent the day reading, finishing the sci-fi novel and starting another, losing himself in worlds where problems could be solved with ingenuity and determination, where the underdog always found a way to triumph. Fiction was easier than reality. Monday morning, the bruise had ripened to a deep purple-black, spectacular and obvious. Thaddeus covered it as best he could with his hair, but it was impossible to hide completely. He arrived at school early, hoping to get to his locker before the hallways filled, but Connor was already there, leaning against the lockers with his arms crossed, clearly waiting. "Thaddeus!" he called out, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. "Man, that bruise looks rough. What happened?" Thaddeus approached his locker, worked the combination. "Doesn't matter." "Doesn't matter," Connor repeated, and his tone shifted, becoming sharper. "See? That's your problem, Thad. You don't talk, you don't explain things, makes people think you're hiding something." "I'm not hiding anything." "No!" Connor pushed off from the lockers, circled around so he was blocking Thaddeus's path. "Then how about you tell me something about yourself? Where you from? What's your deal? Why are you so fucking weird all the time?" Thaddeus felt his jaw tighten, a spark of anger cutting through the usual careful control. "I'm from Massachusetts. I'm new here. I'm trying to adjust. That's all there is." "Massachusetts," Connor said, drawing the word out. "Fancy. What, your family rich or something? You some kind of trust fund kid slumming it in Ohio? My family is completely normal." "Normal," Connor echoed, and he moved closer, invaded Thaddeus's space deliberately. "What's your dad do?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them fully understood. Thaddeus held his ground, met Connor's eyes directly for maybe the first time since this started. He works for the school district. Administration. It was the truth, technically. And it was also a carefully calibrated answer that revealed nothing while satisfying the question. Connor studied him, looking for the lie, and seemed satisfied with what he found. School district, he said, so like a desk job, paper pusher. Something like that. Connor nodded slowly, then without warning reached out and pressed his thumb directly into the center of Thaddeus's bruise. The pain was immediate and shocking, bright white behind his eyes, and Thaddeus jerked back involuntarily, his vision swimming. "Just checking," Connor said pleasantly. "Making sure that's real and not makeup or something. You'd be surprised the things people fake for attention." He stepped back, admiring his handiwork as tears involuntarily leaked from the corners of Thaddeus's eyes. "Yeah, that's real. That's a good one. You should be more careful, Thad. Seriously." He walked away, leaving Thaddeus gripping his locker door for support, waiting for the pain to subside to manageable levels. Around him, students were beginning to arrive, the hallway filling with noise and motion, and nobody stopped to ask if he was okay. He was learning the rules of this ecosystem. Every school had them, variations on the same basic theme. There were predators and prey, bystanders and enablers, and everyone knew their role. Disrupting that order was dangerous for everyone involved, so people looked away, protected themselves, and let nature take its course. The morning passed in a blur of pain and determination. Thaddeus took notes in his classes mechanically, answered questions when called on with quiet competence, and counted down the minutes until lunch. In the cafeteria, he claimed his corner table again, unwrapped his sandwich, and tried to lose himself in his book, but the words wouldn't stick, his attention fracturing every time someone walked too close or spoke too loudly. "Hey, is this seat taken?" He looked up to find Sophie from English class, standing there with her tray, Hannah and Devon behind her. All three were smiling tentatively, asking permission. "No," Thaddeus said, surprised. "Go ahead." They sat, and suddenly his lonely corner didn't feel quite so isolated. Sophie immediately launched into a story about her disastrous morning, oversleeping, missing the bus, getting a ride from her older brother who complained the entire way. And Hannah interjected with her own commentary, while Devon listened with quiet amusement. They included Thaddeus naturally, asking his opinion, reacting to his responses, treating him like he belonged there. "What happened to your head?" Hannah asked eventually, noticing the bruise now that she was up close. "Lock a door," Thaddeus said, the lie smooth now with repetition. "Ouch, that looks painful." "It's fine." They accepted this and moved on, and Thaddeus felt something in his chest loosen fractionally. Maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe there were good people here, allies he could find if he just let them in a little. The thought was both comforting and terrifying, because allies meant people who could be targeted, collateral damage in Connor's campaign against him. After lunch, walking to history class, Connor intercepted him in the hallway. But this time, instead of physical intimidation, he just fell into step beside Thaddeus, matching his pace. "Saw you at lunch," Connor said conversationally, "making friends with Sophie Chen and her little crew." Thaddeus kept walking, didn't respond. "Chen, so Hannah's last name was Chen." He filed that away. "Sophie's nice," Connor continued. "Popular even, cheerleader, honor roll, the whole package. Devon's a nerd but harmless. Hannah's whatever." He paused, let the implications settle. Be a shame if they got caught up in something that wasn't their problem. You know, the threat was crystal clear. Associate with me and I'll make their lives hell too. Thaddeus felt cold fury wash through him, a pure, clean anger that burned away the usual caution. He stopped walking, turned to face Connor directly. "Leave them alone," he said quietly. Connor's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. Whoa, look at that. Thad's got some backbone after all. I was starting to think you were completely spineless. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. I'll leave them alone as long as you remember your place. But you step out of line, you try to make trouble for me, and they're fair game. Understand? Thaddeus understood. He understood that Connor was a textbook bully, cowardly and cruel in equal measure, someone who derived power from making others suffer. He understood that this would get worse before it got better, that Connor would push and push until something broke. And he understood that he couldn't let that something be Sophie or Hannah or Devon, people who'd shown him basic human kindness. I understand, he said. Good. Connor clapped him on the shoulder, hard enough to hurt, a gesture that probably looked friendly from a distance. We're making progress, Thad. Real progress. The rest of the week followed the established pattern. Harassment in the hallways, intimidation between classes, the constant low-level anxiety of waiting for the next incident. But Connor left Sophie and her friends alone, true to his word, and for that small mercy Thaddeus was grateful. He continued having lunch with them, working on the English project, gradually learning their routines and personalities. Sophie was bright and energetic, quick to laugh but also deeply thoughtful when the situation called for it. Hannah was quieter, more observant, with a dry sense of humor that caught Thaddeus off guard. Devon was brilliant in that specific way of people who consumed information voraciously. He knew obscure facts about everything from Byzantine history to the mating habits of deep-sea fish, and could connect seemingly unrelated concepts with effortless creativity. You're really smart, Sophie said to Thaddeus one afternoon while they worked in the library. The others had left early for various commitments, leaving just the two of them reviewing their final draft. Like, really smart. Why do you act like you're trying to disappear? The question was gentle but pointed, and Thaddeus didn't have a good answer. Or rather, he had too many answers, all of them complicated. I'm just trying to get through the year, he said finally. That's a depressing goal. You should try to do more than just survive, actually experience things, make memories. Memories aren't always good things to make. Sophie studied him with those bright, perceptive eyes. Something happened to you before, at your old school. It wasn't a question. Thaddeus closed his laptop, buying time. How much should he share? How much could he risk? There were some problems, he said carefully. Nothing dramatic, just it wasn't a good fit. That's why we moved. And you think it's going to be the same here? I don't know. Maybe. Sophie reached across the table, touched his hand briefly, a gesture of comfort, nothing more, but it sent an electric jolt through him anyway. For what it's worth, I think you're pretty cool. You're different, but that's a good thing. The world doesn't need more Connors. Connor's giving you trouble. The question came out more sharply than Thaddeus intended. No more than usual. He gives everyone trouble. That's kind of his thing. She pulled her hand back, began packing up her materials. But I can handle Connor Walsh. I've known him since kindergarten, and he's been a jerk for about 11 of those years. Don't worry about me. But Thaddeus did worry, because Connor had made it clear that Sophie was leverage now, a pressure point he could exploit, and the thought of her being targeted because of him made his chest tight with something that felt like panic. The English project was due on a Friday, presented in front of the class. Thaddeus stood with his group, listening to Sophie explain their analysis of metaphor with confidence and clarity, watching Hannah outline their conclusions with precision, and contributing his own sections when prompted. Mrs. Morrison, their English teacher, asked insightful questions and seemed genuinely impressed with their work. When they sat down, Sophie leaned over and whispered, "We crushed that," and Thaddeus couldn't help but smile. At his locker after class, he found another note taped to the door. This one was less creative than the previous graffiti, just a simple message in block capitals. "Nobody likes you." He crumpled it up, threw it away, and tried not to think about how Connor would have had to be here during the class period to leave it, which meant he'd either skipped his own class or had someone do it for him. Either way, the harassment was becoming more organized, more deliberate. That weekend, Thaddeus's mother finally arrived from Boston. She pulled up Saturday morning in a moving van, loaded with the rest of their belongings, her face bright with relief at having the family reunited. Thaddeus helped unload boxes, arranged furniture according to her instructions, and tried to present the image of a son who was adjusting fine, making friends, having a normal high school experience. His mother was perceptive, though, even more so than his father, and she noticed the careful way he moved, the guardedness that hadn't been there before the move. "How's school really?" she asked Sunday evening as they unpacked boxes in the living room, his father already asleep upstairs after a long week. "It's fine, Mom." "Thaddeus?" She stopped folding the blanket in her hands, gave him her full attention. "Talk to me." And maybe it was the exhaustion, or the relief of having her there, or just the accumulated weight of the past 2 weeks. But he told her. Not everything. He left out the worst of it, the physical intimidation and the threats, but enough. About Connor, about being the new kid, about trying to navigate a social hierarchy that felt both arbitrary and immutable. His mother listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to anger to something that looked like fierce protectiveness. When he finished, she set down the blanket and pulled him into a hug, tight and warm, and everything he'd needed without knowing it. "Your father can help," she said into his hair. "He has authority here." "That would make it worse," Thaddeus said, pulling back. "Trust me, I just need to ride it out. Eventually Connor will get bored and find someone else. And if he doesn't, then I'll deal with it. But on my terms." She studied his face, seeing something there that made her frown. "You sound like you're preparing for a war." "Maybe I am." She didn't like that answer, he could tell, but she also knew her son well enough to recognize when pushing would only make him close off further. Instead, she made him promise to come to her or his father if things got truly dangerous, made him swear that he wouldn't let pride or stubbornness put him at risk. He made the promise, meaning it in the moment, hoping he'd never have to test it. The 3rd week of school brought a shift in tactics. Connor and his friends started a whisper campaign, spreading rumors about Thaddeus with the efficiency of experienced manipulators. He was stuck up. He was secretly rich and looking down on everyone. He'd been expelled from his previous school for violence. He had a criminal record. He was mentally unstable. The rumors contradicted each other, but that didn't matter. The goal was to isolate him, to make him radioactive to anyone who might otherwise befriend him. Sophie confronted him about it on Tuesday at lunch, her expression troubled. "People are saying things about you. Bad things." "I know. Are any of them true?" Thaddeus met her eyes directly. "No, none of them." She believed him immediately, visibly relaxed. "I didn't think so. You're not really the criminal type." "Thanks, I think." "Connor's the source, obviously. He's telling everyone you threatened him, that you're dangerous. It's such obvious bullshit, but people believe it anyway because—" She trailed off, frustrated. "Because he's popular and I'm not," Thaddeus finished. "It's fine." "I'm used to it." "That's even sadder. Nobody should be used to this." But he was. And he suspected he'd be dealing with variations of Connor Walsh for the rest of his life. People who derived their self-worth from diminishing others, who built themselves up by tearing others down. The names and faces would change, but the fundamental dynamic remained constant. In history class, Mrs. Patterson assigned a paper on the Constitutional Convention due in 2 weeks. Thaddeus threw himself into the research with perhaps more intensity than necessary, grateful for a distraction that was productive. He spent hours in the library after school, pulling books on the Federalist Papers and reading primary sources until his eyes burned. The librarian, Mrs. Kellerman, noticed his dedication and started leaving relevant materials on a desk in the back corner, the one with the good light and a view of the courtyard. It was there, surrounded by books about dead politicians and their philosophical debates, that he met Iris. She appeared on a Thursday afternoon, dropping her bag on the table across from him with a heavy thud that made him look up from his notes. She was striking in an unconventional way, dark hair chopped short in a style that suggested she'd done it herself, multiple ear piercings, a vintage band t-shirt for a group Thaddeus didn't recognize, and eyes that were a startling shade of grey-green. She noticed him staring and raised an eyebrow. "This seat taken?" "No," Thaddeus said, then returned to his notes, assuming that would be the end of the interaction. It wasn't. "You're the new kid everyone's talking about," Iris said, pulling out her own laptop and a stack of note cards. "Thaddeus, right?" "Yeah. I'm Iris. I don't know if you've noticed, but people are saying some pretty wild stuff about you." "I've noticed. For what it's worth, I don't believe any of it. Connor Walsh is a documented liar and a tool, and anyone who takes him seriously is an idiot." She said this matter-of-factly, without heat, like she was commenting on the weather. "So what are you actually working on?" Thaddeus gestured to his books. "Paper on the Constitutional Convention for History." "Patterson's class?" "Yeah, she's intense but fair. I had her last year." Iris opened her laptop, began typing with rapid-fire efficiency. "I'm working on a proposal for the art show. Trying to convince the administration that my photography series is appropriate for a school setting, even though it includes some edgy content. It's going to be a fight." "What's the series about?" Iris looked up, surprised he'd asked. "Identity and masks. Literally, I have people wearing different masks and then photograph them in various settings. It's about how we present ourselves versus who we really are. Pretty basic art student stuff, but I like it." "Sounds cool. You should come to the show when it happens, if they let me exhibit, which is a big if." She paused, studied him with those unsettling eyes. "You don't talk much, do you?" "Not really. Is that a strategic choice or just your personality?" The question was so direct, it caught Thaddeus off guard. "Both, maybe." Iris nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Fair enough. Well, for what it's worth, I think the strong, silent type thing works for you. Very mysterious." She returned to her typing, and they worked in companionable silence for the next hour. When Thaddeus gathered his materials to leave, Iris looked up again. "Same time tomorrow. It's nice having someone else here who actually works, instead of just pretending to study while scrolling through their phone." "Sure," Thaddeus said, and he realized he meant it. The pattern continued. Every afternoon after school, Thaddeus would claim his desk in the library, and Iris would arrive within 20 minutes, dropping into the seat across from him like it was assigned. They worked mostly in silence, occasionally exchanging comments or questions, slowly building a rapport based on mutual respect and minimal social demands. Iris didn't press for personal information, didn't treat him like a project or a problem to solve. She just existed in his space comfortably, and he found himself looking forward to those afternoons with an intensity that surprised him. Sophie noticed, of course. She had a talent for noticing things. "You've been spending time with Iris Nakamura," she said one day at lunch, her tone carefully neutral. "We study in the library together sometimes. She's cool, intense but cool, does amazing photography." Sophie paused, then continued with studied casualness. "She's also pretty." Thaddeus felt heat creep up his neck. "I guess." "You guess," Sophie repeated, and there was amusement in her voice now. "Thaddeus Merrick, do you have a crush?" "We're just friends. Study partners. Uh-huh, and that blush is just because it's warm in here. Hannah leaned over, interested now. Wait, what did I miss? Thaddeus has been spending his afternoons with Iris Nakamura, Sophie announced, like she was revealing breaking news. Library study sessions. Very romantic. It's not romantic. We just work at the same table. For how long? I don't know. A week. Every day. Most days. Sophie and Hannah exchanged meaningful glances that made Thaddeus want to sink through the floor. That's totally a thing, Hannah declared. You need to ask her out. I'm not asking her out. We barely know each other. That's what dating is for. Getting to know each other. Can we please talk about something else? They could and did, but Thaddeus could see the wheels turning in Sophie's head, plotting and planning in that way she had. He made a mental note to be very clear with Iris that he didn't put them up to anything if his friends suddenly appeared with matchmaking schemes. That afternoon in the library, Iris looked up from her laptop and said without preamble, "So Sophie Chen cornered me earlier and gave me an extremely unsubtle interrogation about our study sessions. I take it you told her we've been working together?" Thaddeus groaned. "I mentioned it. She ran with it. She seems to think we're dating. We're not. Obviously." Iris returned to her screen, then added after a moment, "Although for what it's worth, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea. You're interesting, different from most of the idiots in this school." Thaddeus's brain short-circuited momentarily. Oh, Iris echoed, amused. Very articulate. Look, I'm not trying to make this weird. I'm just putting it out there. If you're interested, we could hang out sometime, actually hang out, not just study in parallel. If you're not interested, that's fine too. We can keep doing this library thing with no pressure. I'm interested, Thaddeus said before he could overthink it. Iris smiled, and it transformed her entire face from merely striking to genuinely beautiful. Cool. There's a coffee shop downtown that shows old movies on Friday nights. You want to check it out this week? Yeah, that sounds good. It's a date then. She said it lightly, but Thaddeus could see the pleased satisfaction in her expression. Now stop distracting me with your devastating personal revelations. I have to finish this proposal. Thaddeus tried to return to his Constitutional Convention paper, but the words swam on the page, his thoughts a chaotic tangle of excitement and terror. He had a date with Iris, who was smart and interesting, and apparently thought he was interesting too. It felt impossible and perfect and terrifying all at once. The joy lasted approximately 18 hours. Friday morning, Thaddeus arrived at his locker to find it had been vandalized again, this time more extensively. Someone had covered it in permanent marker, crude drawings and insults overlapping each other in a mess of black lines. The word freak dominated the center, but there were others: nobody, weirdo, psycho, loser, creating a visual assault that made passing students stop and stare. Thaddeus stood there, staring at the damage, feeling something cold and hard settle in his chest. This was beyond casual harassment. This was deliberate destruction of property, would cost money to fix, would require reporting. And reporting meant involving administration, which meant involving his father, which would expose everything. Jesus, Sophie's voice came from beside him, horrified. Who would do this? Guess, Thaddeus said flatly. Connor appeared at the end of the hallway with Jackson and Marcus, all three wearing expressions of exaggerated shock. Wow, Thad, someone really did a number on your locker. That's terrible. You should report that to someone. The implication was clear. Report it and face worse consequences. Thaddeus felt rage burning in his throat, hot and acidic, but he forced it down. I'll handle it. You sure? Because vandalism is serious. The principal should know about this. The emphasis on principal was subtle but unmistakable. Connor knew, or suspected, or was fishing for information. Either way, Thaddeus couldn't take the bait. I said I'll handle it. Connor shrugged, feigning concern. Suit yourself. But man, that's rough. Someone must really not like you. He walked away, and Thaddeus opened his locker carefully, checking if anything inside had been damaged. His books seemed untouched, his gym bag still there, but the violation felt profound anyway. This wasn't just his locker. It was his space, his small claim to territory in this building, and it had been desecrated. Sophie touched his arm gently. Let me help clean this up. I have some rubbing alcohol in my bag, might help with the marker. You don't have to. I want to. Come on. They spent the period before first bell trying to scrub off the worst of it, managing to fade some of the insults, but not erase them completely. Other students stopped to help or offer supplies, and Thaddeus realized that not everyone was indifferent to what was happening. There were people who cared, who saw the cruelty for what it was, even if they couldn't or wouldn't confront it directly. Mrs. Kellerman, the librarian, appeared with proper cleaning supplies and a stepladder. I saw what happened, she said without preamble. This is unacceptable. You should file a report. I'll take care of it, Thaddeus said, using the same neutral tone he'd deployed with Connor. She studied him with sharp eyes that had seen decades of student drama. You're protecting someone. I'm protecting myself. She didn't argue, just helped them clean, and by the time the late bell rang, they'd managed to render the locker merely dirty rather than actively hostile. Thaddeus thanked her, grabbed his books, and rushed to history class already 10 minutes late. Mrs. Patterson marked him tardy without comment, and Thaddeus took his seat, trying to focus on her lecture about the Compromise of 1790. But his thoughts kept circling back to the locker, to Connor's knowing look, to the precarious balance he was trying to maintain. How much longer could he keep this up? How much more could he take before something broke? The answer came sooner than expected. At lunch, Connor made his move in the most public way possible. Thaddeus was sitting with Sophie, Hannah, and Devon at their usual table when Connor approached, flanked by his usual crew and 3 additional football players Thaddeus didn't recognize. The cafeteria was packed, hundreds of students eating and talking, and when Connor stopped at their table, conversations began dying out in ripples, everyone sensing drama. Thad, Connor said pleasantly, we need to talk. We're eating, Sophie said, her voice sharp. Go away, Connor. This doesn't concern you, Sophie. This is between me and Thad. Everything you do concerns me when you're harassing my friends. Connor's smile thinned. Harassing. That's a strong word. I prefer establishing communication. See, Thad here has been avoiding me, and I think that's rude. We're all part of the same school community. We should be friendly. Thaddeus set down his sandwich carefully, met Connor's eyes. What do you want? I want to know more about you, Thad. You're so mysterious. Like, for instance, your dad works in the school district, right? Administration? That's what you said. But I've been thinking about that, and it's kind of vague. What does he actually do? Is he like an accountant, HR? Or maybe something more important? The entire cafeteria seemed to be holding its breath. Thaddeus could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes, the pressure of the moment crystallizing into something sharp and dangerous. Connor was fishing, testing, pushing to see how Thaddeus would react. Any deflection would confirm suspicions, but telling the truth would detonate this entire situation. He's an administrator, Thaddeus said evenly. That's all you need to know. But I'm curious, Connor pressed, leaning forward with his palms flat on the table. See, my dad knows everyone in the district, and when I mentioned your last name, Merrick, he got this funny look on his face, said it was interesting that a Merrick kid was at Lincoln High this year. What do you think he meant by that? Thaddeus said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. He saw the realization dawn on Connor's face, watched the pieces connect, the moment of understanding that shifted the entire dynamic. Holy shit, Connor said softly. Your dad's the new principal. The cafeteria exploded in whispers, students turning to each other in excitement, phones emerging to capture the moment. Thaddeus felt the secret he'd been carrying for 3 weeks shatter like glass, irretrievable pieces scattering across the floor. "You're fucking with us," Jackson said, but his voice carried doubt. "No, he's not," Connor said, still staring at Thaddeus with a mix of anger and something that might have been fear. "That's why he's been so quiet. That's why he won't fight back. He's been spying on us this whole time." "I haven't been spying," Thaddeus started, but Connor cut him off. "Shut up, just shut up." Connor's face was flushed now, genuine anger breaking through the practiced cruelty. "You could have told me. You could have said something. Instead, you let me." He stopped, seemed to realize he was about to confess to harassment in front of hundreds of witnesses. "Let you what?" Sophie asked, standing now. "Let you bully him? Intimidate him? Vandalize his locker? Yeah, Thaddeus is a terrible person for not warning you that he had family in administration. What a monster!" The sarcasm was biting, and several students laughed nervously. Connor's flush deepened, humiliation replacing anger. He'd been outmaneuvered, exposed, made to look foolish in front of the entire school. And in Thaddeus's experience, there was nothing more dangerous than a bully who felt humiliated. "This isn't over," Connor said quietly, pointing at Thaddeus. "Not even close." He stalked away, his entourage following, and the cafeteria slowly returned to normal volume. But everything had changed. Thaddeus could feel it in the way students looked at him now, not with pity or indifference, but with calculation. He was the principal's son. He had power, connections, the ability to get people in serious trouble. The social equation had shifted dramatically. "Well," Devon said into the silence at their table, "that escalated." "Are you okay?" Hannah asked Thaddeus, concern evident in her expression. "I don't know," he said honestly. His phone buzzed with a text from his father. "We need to talk." "My office. Last period." Thaddeus showed Sophie the message, and she winced. "Ouch!" "Yeah." The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Students whispered as Thaddeus passed in the hallways, some offering sympathetic smiles, others looking at him with new suspicion. The invisibility he'd carefully cultivated was gone, replaced by an unwanted spotlight. He was no longer just the new kid. He was the principal's son who'd been lying by omission for weeks, and that made people question everything they thought they knew about him. In the library after final bell, Iris found him at their usual table, dropped into the seat across from him with her characteristic lack of ceremony. "Heard you had an exciting lunch period," she said. "Something like that. For what it's worth, I think Connor's a dick and probably deserved to be kept in the dark." She paused. "Although I'm curious why you didn't tell me. We've been hanging out for over a week." "I didn't tell anyone," Thaddeus said. "It wasn't personal." "I get that. But you know what this means, right? Everyone's going to treat you differently now. Some people will try to use you to get to your dad. Some people will resent you for having that connection. Some people will assume every good thing that happens to you is nepotism. It's going to suck." "I know." "And our date tonight? People are going to talk about that too. Say you're dating the principal's son to get special treatment or whatever. That doesn't bother you?" Thaddeus looked at her directly. "Does it bother you?" Iris considered this, then shook her head. "No. I know why I like you, and it has nothing to do with who your dad is. But I wanted to make sure you knew what you were signing up for." "I appreciate that." "Good. So we're still on for tonight, if you still want to." "I do." She smiled, then became serious again. "But Thaddeus, be careful with Connor. He's going to come after you hard now. He has to save face. And he's not going to care about consequences anymore because he figures he's already screwed. I can handle Connor. I hope so, because that guy has a mean streak a mile wide, and when he feels cornered, he gets vicious." She was right, Thaddeus knew. But there wasn't much he could do, except prepare himself for whatever came next. At 3:45, he knocked on the door of the principal's office. His father's voice called for him to enter, and Thaddeus stepped into the space that had become familiar over the summer. The office was large, but simply furnished. Desk, chairs, bookshelves lined with educational texts and district policy manuals, a window overlooking the parking lot. His father sat behind the desk, and his expression was complicated. "Sit down," his father said, gesturing to one of the visitor chairs. Thaddeus sat. "So," his father began, "I've spent the last hour fielding calls and messages from staff members concerned about a confrontation in the cafeteria. Care to tell me your version?" Thaddeus recounted the scene as accurately as he could, leaving out nothing except the weeks of harassment that had preceded it. His father listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer as the story progressed. When Thaddeus finished, his father leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Connor Walsh, of course it is. Do you know who his father is?" He mentioned he's a lawyer. Walsh and Associates, one of the most prominent law firms in the county. They handle all the school district's legal work. Mitchell Walsh is on the school board. His father sighed heavily. "This is going to be complicated." "I didn't ask for any of this," Thaddeus said, hearing the defensiveness in his own voice. "I know, but it's the situation we're in now." His father studied him carefully. "Has Connor been giving you trouble?" Before today? This was the moment. Thaddeus could tell everything, the harassment, the intimidation, the vandalism. His father had the power to address it, to make Connor face real consequences, but doing so would confirm every suspicion that he'd been using his connection to his father as a shield, would make him look weak and dependent. "Nothing I couldn't handle," Thaddeus said. His father's eyes narrowed. "Thaddeus?" "Really, Dad?" "It's fine. He's just a bully. Every school has them. And every school has policies against bullying. If he's been targeting you..." "He hasn't been targeting me specifically. He's just a jerk to everyone. I'm not special." His father clearly didn't believe him, but he also recognized the stubborn set of Thaddeus's jaw, the refusal to be seen as needing rescue. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "Okay. But from this point forward, you come to me if there are problems, real problems. Don't try to handle everything yourself." "I will." "I mean it, Thaddeus. Connor Walsh is not someone to underestimate. His father has considerable influence, and Connor knows it, if he thinks he can get away with something." "I understand." They sat in silence for a moment. The distance between principal and father, between authority figure and concerned parent, stretching uncomfortably. "Your mother and I just wanted you to have a normal senior year," his father said finally. "A fresh start. I know, and I appreciate it, but maybe normal isn't possible for us." His father smiled sadly. "Maybe not." Thaddeus left the office feeling hollowed out and exhausted. The school was mostly empty now, just a few students lingering for sports practice or club meetings. He retrieved his things from his locker, still stained despite their cleaning efforts, and headed out to the parking lot. Iris was waiting by the front entrance, her camera bag slung over one shoulder. "Hey," she said, "I figured you might need a friendly face after talking to your dad." "How'd it go?" "As well as could be expected." "That bad, huh?" She fell into step beside him as they walked toward the street. "So, our date. You still up for it, or do you need to rain check?" Thaddeus considered. He could go home, hide in his room, try to process everything that had happened, or he could choose to do something normal, something that reminded him that life contained more than just survival and stress. "I'm up for it," he said. "What time?" "Movie starts at 7. I can pick you up at 6:30. I'll meet you there." "What's the address?" she told him, and they exchanged phone numbers, typing them into each other's phones, with the self-conscious awkwardness of people who were still figuring out how to be around each other. When Iris left, heading toward the bus stop, Thaddeus walked home slowly, trying to prepare himself for whatever came next. His mother was in the kitchen when he arrived, unpacking the last boxes of cookware. She took one look at his face and set down the pot she was holding. What happened, he told her. Everything this time. The weeks of harassment, the vandalized locker, the cafeteria confrontation, the revelation. She listened with her arms crossed, her expression cycling through anger and worry and fierce protectiveness. That Walsh boy needs to face consequences, she said when he finished. Your father needs to. Dad can't do anything without it looking like he's playing favorites or being vindictive. You know that. So Connor just gets away with it? For now. But he exposed himself today. Everyone knows what he's been doing, even if they won't admit it. That has to count for something. His mother pulled him into a hug, tight and fierce. I hate this. I hate that you have to deal with this. I know, but I can handle it. You shouldn't have to handle it. You should just get to be a normal kid. But Thaddeus had long ago accepted that normal was a relative term, and his version of it would always include complications that other people didn't have to navigate. That evening he met Iris at the coffee shop, a place called the Grindhouse that occupied a converted warehouse downtown. Inside it was all exposed brick and mismatched furniture, with a movie screen at one end and scattered tables throughout. The film tonight was Rear Window, a Hitchcock classic that Thaddeus had never seen. They ordered coffee, black for him, vanilla latte for her, and claimed a couch near the back. Hitchcock is perfect first-date material, Iris said as the opening credits rolled. Not too romantic to be presumptuous, but classic enough to show good taste. You've thought this through. I think everything through. It's a blessing and a curse. They watched in comfortable silence, shoulders touching on the small couch, and Thaddeus felt some of the day's tension drain away. This was normal. This was nice. This was what he'd been hoping for when they moved to Ohio. Moments of simple human connection without drama or complications. After the movie, they walked around downtown, talking about film and photography and art. Iris showed him her portfolio on her phone, images that captured people in moments of vulnerability and strength, masks both literal and metaphorical. Her work was stunning, insightful in ways that felt almost invasive, but she talked about it with casual confidence. You see people clearly? Thaddeus observed, like really see them. That's the goal. Most of us walk around wearing these carefully constructed versions of ourselves, hiding the real stuff underneath. I'm interested in what's underneath. And what do you see when you look at me? Iris smiled. Someone who's scared and angry and lonely, but also stubborn and determined and kind. Someone who's been hurt, but hasn't let it make them cruel. Someone worth knowing. The assessment was so accurate it made Thaddeus's chest tight. That's pretty on the nose. I told you, I see clearly. She bumped his shoulder with hers. It's not a bad thing, by the way. Those qualities, they make you interesting. Most people just think I'm weird. Most people are idiots. They reached the parking lot where Iris had left her car, an ancient Honda with more rust than paint. She unlocked it, then turned back to him. So, she said, this was fun. We should do it again sometime, definitely. And Thaddeus, whatever happens with Connor, whatever happens at school, you're not alone in this. Okay? Okay. She stretched up on her toes and kissed his cheek quickly, then got in her car before he could react. He watched her drive away, touching the spot where her lips had been, feeling something warm and bright bloom in his chest, despite everything else. The weekend passed quietly. His father worked from home, catching up on paperwork and phone calls. His mother organized the house with methodical efficiency. Thaddeus alternated between homework and helping his parents, and tried not to think about Monday. But Sunday night, As he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the sense that something was building, that Connor wouldn't let this go, that the fragile piece was about to shatter. He was right. Monday morning started with whispers. Students who'd never spoken to Thaddeus suddenly wanted to introduce themselves, ask questions, probe for information. Some were genuine, curious about what it was like being the principal's son. Others were clearly angling for favors or inside information. Thaddeus deflected them all politely, maintaining the careful neutrality that had become his default mode. At his locker, someone had written "snitch" in soap on the metal. Easy to clean, but visible, a message for everyone to see. Thaddeus wiped it off without comment, grabbed his books, and headed to history. Connor was waiting outside the classroom. "Thad," he said, his voice carrying just far enough for nearby students to hear. "Got a minute? Class is starting. This won't take long." Connor moved closer, invading Thaddeus's personal space deliberately. "I just wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding. I didn't know who your dad was, and if I'd known, I never would have—" He trailed off meaningfully, letting the implication hang. Several students were watching now, witnessing what looked like a genuine apology, but Thaddeus could see the cold calculation in Connor's eyes, the performance of contrition covering continued hostility. "It's fine," Thaddeus said, because what else could he say with an audience present? "Great. I'm glad we cleared that up. No hard feelings, right?" "Right." Connor clapped him on the shoulder, another performance of friendliness that was actually a small act of aggression, and walked into the classroom. Thaddeus followed, taking his seat, trying to ignore the curious looks from other students. The day continued in similar fashion. Connor maintained a veneer of civility in public while finding smaller, subtler ways to harass Thaddeus, a deliberately late group project partner. Accidentally kicking Thaddeus's chair in class, spreading rumors that Thaddeus was reporting students to his father for minor infractions, nothing overt enough to warrant confrontation, but constant enough to be exhausting. At lunch, Sophie was livid. "He's gaslighting you. He's making it look like you're the problem while he plays the victim. It's textbook manipulation. I know what he's doing. So what are you going to do about it? Wait, watch, be ready." For what? Whatever he's planning. Because Connor Walsh doesn't do subtle for long. This is just set up for something bigger. Thaddeus was proven correct on Wednesday afternoon. He was at his locker after final bell, packing up his things, when Jackson appeared. "Hey, Thad. Connor wants to talk to you, out by the athletic fields." Thaddeus felt alarm bells ringing immediately. About what? He didn't say. Just said, to meet him. "Tell him we can talk tomorrow, in public." Jackson shrugged. "Suit yourself." But he said it was important. "About your girlfriend." The alarm bells became sirens. "What about Iris?" "I don't know, man. He just said you should come if you care about her." "But whatever." Jackson walked away, leaving Thaddeus frozen with indecision. It was obviously a trap. Meeting Connor alone at the athletic fields, away from teachers and cameras, was asking for trouble. But the mention of Iris changed the equation. If Connor was planning to target her as revenge against Thaddeus, he needed to know. He pulled out his phone, texted Iris, "Where are you?" Her response came quickly, "Library, working on photos." Why? Relief flooded through him. She was safe inside, surrounded by people. But that didn't mean Connor wasn't planning something for later. Thaddeus made a decision, one he knew was probably stupid, but felt necessary. He headed for the athletic fields. The fields were empty at this time of day. Sports practices wouldn't start for another hour. Thaddeus found Connor waiting by the bleachers, Jackson and Marcus flanking him, plus two other guys Thaddeus recognized from the football team, 5 against 1, in a location with no witnesses. Yeah, definitely a trap. "Thad!" Connor called out, all false friendliness. "Glad you could make it. We need to settle some things." Thaddeus stopped 20 feet away, maintaining distance. "What things?" "See, I've been thinking about our situation, and I realized you've put me in a really difficult position. Because of you, everyone thinks I'm a bully. Because of you, I'm probably going to face disciplinary action from your daddy. Because of you, my reputation is damaged." "You damaged your own reputation by actually being a bully." Connor's smile vanished. "Watch your mouth." "Or what? You're going to hit me, beat me up? How exactly do you think that plays out, Connor? You assault the principal's son in broad daylight, and what happens to you?" "Who said anything about assault?" Connor spread his hands innocently. "This is just a conversation between classmates, an exchange of perspectives. Although," he paused dramatically, "accidents happen, don't they? People get hurt in accidents all the time. Trip and fall, hit their head, nobody's fault really." The threat was clear and unmistakable. Thaddeus felt his heart rate spike, adrenaline flooding his system, the familiar pre-fight tension he'd been managing to avoid for weeks. He'd promised himself he wouldn't get into situations like this, wouldn't put himself in positions where violence became necessary. But here he was anyway, because Connor had mentioned Iris, and he couldn't ignore that. "Stay away from Iris," Thaddeus said quietly. "Whatever problem you have, it's with me. Leave her out of it." "Oh, you care about her. That's sweet. The freak and the weird art girl. Makes sense, actually." "Indeed," Connor took a step forward. "But see, here's the thing, Thad. If I can't touch you without consequences, then I have to get creative. And Iris seems like a really easy target. Fragile, sensitive, the kind of person who might not handle certain kinds of attention very well." Pure rage flashed through Thaddeus, hot and clean. "I'm warning you." "You're warning me?" Connor laughed, and his crew laughed with him. "You don't get to warn anyone. You're nothing. You're a scared little kid hiding behind his daddy's authority. Without that, you're just another loser I can break whenever I want." He shoved Thaddeus hard in the chest, not hard enough to knock him down, but hard enough to provoke a response. Thaddeus stumbled back a step, caught himself, fought against every instinct screaming at him to fight back. "That's what I thought," Connor said, reading his restraint as weakness. "You won't do anything. You can't. Because the second you hit me, you prove you're exactly what I've been saying. Violent, unstable, dangerous. And then your daddy has to explain why his psycho son attacked a student unprovoked." Another shove, harder this time. Thaddeus's back hit the bleachers with a metallic clang. "So here's what's going to happen," Connor continued, leaning in close. "You're going to transfer to another school. Tell your daddy you can't handle it here, that you need a fresh start somewhere else, and then you leave and this all goes away." "I'm not leaving." "Then I make your life hell, and Iris's life hell, and anyone else who tries to be friends with you. I'll make this school so miserable for you that leaving is the only option." He pressed his forearm against Thaddeus's throat, not choking him but close. "This is me being nice, Thad. Giving you the easy way out. Take it." Thaddeus grabbed Connor's arm, pulled it away from his throat with more force than necessary. Connor stumbled back, surprised by the strength, and for a moment something dangerous flickered in the space between them. "I'm not leaving," Thaddeus repeated. "And if you go near Iris, if you even look at her wrong, I will make you regret it." Connor's expression shifted to something uglier, meaner. "There it is, the real you. Violent little psycho after all." He turned to his crew. "You guys saw that, right? He threatened me, grabbed me. That's assault." They all nodded dutifully, backing up the lie. Thaddeus realized how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. 5 witnesses who would swear he'd initiated physical contact, who would paint him as the aggressor. Connor had set this up perfectly. "Tell you what," Connor said, pulling out his phone. "I'm going to do you a favor. I'm not going to report this. I'm going to give you one more chance to do the right thing and leave. But if you're still here Friday, then the gloves come off. Understand. Thaddeus understood. He understood that Connor had just declared war, that there were no more rules, that things were about to get significantly worse. But he also understood that running would solve nothing, that Connor would just find another target, that cowardice disguised as wisdom was still cowardice. "I'll see you Friday," Thaddeus said. He walked away, feeling their eyes on his back, half expecting them to jump him anyway, but they let him go, satisfied with having delivered their message. His hands were shaking by the time he reached the parking lot, adrenaline crash making his legs unsteady. His phone buzzed with a text from Iris. "Still alive? Yeah, we need to talk. Library. Hurry." He found her at their usual table, her laptop open but forgotten. She took one look at his face and closed the computer. "What happened?" He told her, leaving nothing out this time. The threat, the shove, the ultimatum. She listened with growing anger, her jaw tight. "He can't threaten me," she said when he finished. "I'm not some delicate flower who needs protecting. I know, but he knows you matter to me, which makes you leverage. So what's the plan? You transfer?" "No." "Then what?" Thaddeus was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with options that all seemed bad. "I call his bluff. Stay through Friday and beyond. Force him to either back down or escalate in ways he can't hide. That's risky. He might actually hurt you." "Maybe. Probably. But running just moves the problem to another school, and it teaches him that threats and intimidation work." Iris reached across the table, took his hand. "Okay. Then I'm with you. We face this together. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Besides, someone needs to photograph this disaster for posterity." Despite everything, Thaddeus smiled. "You're kind of amazing, you know that." "I do know that, yes, but it's nice to hear anyway." They sat there, hands linked across the table, both understanding that they were choosing a hard path, but choosing it together. And somehow that made it feel slightly less impossible. The next 2 days were tense, charged with the electricity of an approaching storm. Connor maintained his public civility while ramping up harassment through proxies, underclassmen accidentally spilling things on Thaddeus, rumors spreading about Iris being his girlfriend only to get special treatment, mysterious messages appearing on social media, nothing directly traceable to Connor, but all bearing his fingerprints. On Thursday, Thaddeus's father called him to the office again. "I've been hearing reports," his father said without preamble, "conflicts between you and Connor Walsh. Staff members have noticed tension. I need you to tell me what's really going on." Thaddeus weighed his options. Telling his father would trigger official intervention, would force Connor to face consequences, but would also validate every accusation that Thaddeus couldn't handle his own problems. Not telling his father maintained his independence, but left him without backup if things went truly sideways. "Connor and I have some disagreements," Thaddeus said carefully, "but nothing I can't manage." "Thaddeus, if he's threatening you..." "He's not. Or nothing I can prove. It's mostly just tension because of the whole principal's son thing. It'll blow over." His father didn't look convinced. "I'm hearing rumors that something is supposed to happen Friday. That Connor has been telling people to be at the athletic fields after school. Do you know anything about that?" Thaddeus's stomach dropped. "No." Another lie, adding to the growing collection. His father studied him with professional assessment, clearly reading the deception, but respecting Thaddeus's autonomy enough not to push. "If something happens," his father said slowly, "if you need help, you come find me. Or any staff member. Don't try to handle everything alone." "I won't. I mean it, Thaddeus. I can't protect you if I don't know you need protecting." The truth hung unspoken between them, that sometimes protection itself was the problem, that being seen as the principal's son needing Daddy's help was worse than whatever Connor could do. His father seemed to understand this, seemed to recognize the impossible position they were both in. Just be smart, his father said finally, and safe. Friday morning dawned grey and cold, November asserting itself with the promise of winter ahead. Thaddeus dressed carefully, wore layers he could shed if necessary, tied his shoes tightly. He wasn't planning on fighting, but he'd learned that plans rarely survived contact with reality. At school, the atmosphere was electric. Word had spread about some kind of confrontation happening after school, and students were picking sides, placing bets, treating it like entertainment. Thaddeus moved through the halls, feeling disconnected from his body, operating on autopilot, while his mind raced through scenarios and contingencies. Sophie caught him at his locker. "Everyone's talking about this afternoon." "What's happening?" "I don't know." "Don't lie to me, Thaddeus. Whatever Connor's planning, you know about it." He closed his locker, shouldered his backpack. "Connor wants me to leave the school. He's given me until today to decide. I'm not leaving. So he's going to make you leave. Forcibly. Probably try to. This is insane. You need to tell your dad. Get Connor expelled. Use the authority you have." "And then what? I'm marked forever as the kid who couldn't handle his own problems, the principal's son who ran crying to Daddy. That solves nothing, Sophie. It just moves the target." She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "You could get seriously hurt. Is your pride really worth that?" "It's not about pride. It's about—" He struggled to articulate it. "It's about not letting fear dictate your choices. Not giving bullies power over your life. If I run from Connor, I'll be running from someone like him forever." Sophie's expression softened. "You're brave and stupid in equal measure, you know that?" "So I've been told." She hugged him quickly, fiercely. "Whatever happens, you have people who care about you. Remember that." The day crawled forward with agonizing slowness. Teachers taught, students pretended to learn. The machinery of education ground forward while everyone counted down to the moment when things would either explode or dissipate. Thaddeus couldn't eat lunch, his stomach tight with nerves. Iris sat beside him, not saying much, just present and solid and real. "Last chance to reconsider," she said as the day wound down. "I'm not reconsidering." "Good. Because I'd be disappointed if you did." She pulled out her camera. "I'm going to document whatever happens, as evidence if needed, but also because this is exactly the kind of thing my photography series is about, people confronting their masks. You're going to photograph me getting beat up. I'm going to photograph you standing your ground. Big difference." Final bell rang at 3:15. By 3:30, a crowd had gathered at the athletic fields, easily 100 students forming a loose circle near the bleachers. Some had their phones out, ready to record. Others were nervous, excited by the promise of violence, but uncomfortable with actually witnessing it. Connor stood in the center with his full crew. Jackson Marcus and 3 other football players, Thaddeus now recognized as Devon Torres, Kyle Bennett, and Austin Martinez. Thaddeus approached the circle which parted to let him through. The whispers rose and fell around him like waves. Iris walked beside him, camera already out, capturing everything. They reached the center of the circle, and Thaddeus faced Connor across 10 feet of grass. "Last chance, Thad," Connor said, his voice carrying to the entire crowd. "Walk away. Transfer. Save us both the trouble." "No." Connor nodded, as if this was the expected answer. "Then we're doing this. You and me right now, and when I'm done, you leave Lincoln High and never come back." "And if I win?" Connor laughed. "You're not going to win." "Look around, Thad. 5 of us. 1 of you. The math isn't complicated. So this is it? Your master plan? Jump me 5-on-1 in front of 100 witnesses? You really think that'll end well for you? I think everyone here will testify that you started it, that you attacked me and my friends had to step in to protect me, that you're violent and unstable, exactly what I've been saying all along. Connor pulled out his phone, held it up. "And I'll have this nice recording of you threatening me before the fight started. So yeah, I think it'll end just fine for me." Thaddeus realized the full scope of the trap. Connor had engineered a situation where no matter what happened, Thaddeus would be blamed. If he fought back, he was violent. If he didn't fight back, he'd be beaten so badly he'd have to leave anyway. Either way, Connor won. Unless Thaddeus changed the rules entirely. "You want to fight me?" Thaddeus said loudly, making sure the whole crowd could hear. "Fine, let's fight. But not 5-on-1. Not your crew against me. Just you and me, 1-on-1, right here, right now. Unless you're too scared to face me without your bodyguards." The crowd reacted audibly, oohs and whispers, the social calculus shifting. Connor's face flushed, recognizing the counter-trap. If he refused, he looked like a coward. If he accepted, he lost the numerical advantage. "This isn't a movie, Thad. I don't need to follow some honor code. Because you don't have any honor. You're a coward who hides behind friends and threats. You've never fought fair in your life." Connor's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're a bully who preys on people weaker than you. I know you use your father's reputation to avoid consequences. I know you're fundamentally afraid that without all your advantages, you're nothing." Thaddeus took a step forward. "So prove me wrong. Fight me, 1-on-1. Show everyone here that you're actually capable of backing up all your threats without a pack of friends to hide behind." The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone waited to see how Connor would respond, the moment crystallizing into something that would define reputations and social hierarchies for months to come. Connor looked at his crew, seemed to draw strength from their presence, then looked back at Thaddeus. "Fine," he said. "Just me and you. But when I win, you're gone. Deal?" "Deal." They approached each other slowly, the crowd pressing in tighter to watch. Iris had her camera trained on them, capturing every moment. Thaddeus felt remarkably calm now that the moment had arrived, his heart rate steady, his breathing controlled. He'd spent his entire life avoiding fights, had promised himself after the incident at his previous school that he wouldn't use violence to solve problems. But sometimes the only way through was straight ahead. Connor swung first, a wild haymaker that came from too far away and telegraphed itself clearly. Thaddeus sidestepped it easily, didn't counter, just created distance. Connor stumbled, caught himself, and charged forward with more fury than technique. Another swing, this one a little better aimed, but still sloppy. Thaddeus ducked under it, felt the air move above his head, and backed away again. "Stop running!" Connor yelled, frustration evident. "I'm not running! I'm just not letting you hit me." Connor came at him again, and this time Thaddeus was ready. He caught Connor's wrist mid-swing, used the momentum to spin him around, and shoved him away. It wasn't a strike, wasn't really an attack, just a demonstration that Thaddeus could control the engagement if he wanted to. Connor recovered, breathing hard now, and for the first time looked uncertain. The crowd was reacting now, sensing that this wasn't going how anyone expected. Phones captured every moment, documenting Connor's increasing desperation and Thaddeus's calm defense. Jackson started to move forward to intervene, but Sophie stepped in his path. "You stay out of this," she said loudly. "This was supposed to be 1-on-1. Don't make Connor look even more pathetic." Jackson hesitated, looked at Marcus for support, but Marcus just shrugged. They'd agreed to the terms, and breaking them now would destroy whatever social capital Connor had left. Connor charged again, this time going low, trying for a tackle. Thaddeus sprawled his hips back, a wrestling move he'd learned years ago, and Connor grabbed nothing but air, falling face first into the grass. The crowd gasped, then laughed, and Thaddeus could see the humiliation burning on Connor's face as he pushed himself up. "Where'd you learn that?" Connor demanded, grass stains on his shirt, dirt on his face. "I used to wrestle." Back in Massachusetts. The lie came smoothly, covering for skills that actually came from something else entirely. 2 years of Krav Maga training he'd never mentioned to anyone. defensive training his parents had insisted on after they'd had to move him from his previous school due to an incident he still didn't like thinking about. He'd promised them he'd only use it in genuine emergencies, and he'd kept that promise. Until now. Connor rushed him again, more careful this time, hands up, trying to look like he knew what he was doing. They grappled briefly, Connor trying to overwhelm him with size and strength, but Thaddeus had learned how to deal with bigger opponents. You used their momentum against them, you stayed balanced, you waited for them to overcommit. When Connor pushed, Thaddeus pulled. When Connor pulled, Thaddeus pushed, and when Connor finally overextended, reaching too far, Thaddeus swept his legs and watched him crash to the ground. The crowd was fully invested now, cheering and reacting with every exchange. Thaddeus realized with distant clarity that he was winning, that Connor's reputation was crumbling with every failed attack, that this confrontation was defining him as much as it was defining Connor. Connor got up slowly, breathing hard, frustrated and embarrassed, and increasingly desperate. "You think you're so tough," he said, pulling out his phone. "I told you I'd call the principal. I'll tell him you attacked me, get you expelled." "Go ahead," Thaddeus said calmly. "Call him. Tell him his son defended himself against a bully who threatened his girlfriend. Tell him in front of 100 witnesses who all saw you swing first. See how that goes." Connor stared at the phone in his hand. The bluff called completely. Around them, students were murmuring, the narrative solidifying, Connor as the aggressor, Thaddeus as the victim who'd simply defended himself. Even Connor's friends looked uncomfortable now, recognizing how badly this had gone for their leader. "This isn't over," Connor said, but the words lacked conviction. "Yes, it is," Thaddeus replied. "This is over. You don't get to threaten me anymore. You don't get to threaten Iris or my friends. You don't get to harass people without consequences. Because now everyone knows what you really are." Connor looked around the circle, seemed to really see the crowd for the first time. Their expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust to satisfaction that the school bully had finally been challenged. His crew was backing away, distancing themselves, already recalculating their social strategies. Jackson and Marcus exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them, and then they turned and walked away, just left Connor standing there alone. The abandonment was total and devastating. Connor's face crumpled, not with pain but with the sudden understanding that he'd lost everything, his reputation, his crew, his social power, all of it gone in 15 minutes because he'd been so focused on destroying Thaddeus that he'd forgotten the first rule of bullying: never look weak in front of your followers. Connor started, then stopped, unable to complete the thought. Thaddeus felt something unexpected, pity. Not forgiveness, not friendship, but recognition that Connor was himself trapped in cycles of behavior he probably didn't fully understand, acting out pain and insecurity in the only ways he knew how. "You could be different," Thaddeus said quietly, just for Connor to hear. "This doesn't have to define you forever. But you have to choose it." Connor looked at him with something raw and vulnerable in his eyes, something that might have been the real person buried under all the cruelty and bravado. Then he turned and walked away, pushing through the crowd, his shoulders hunched, alone in a way he probably hadn't been since elementary school. The crowd began dispersing, students breaking into excited discussions, phones already uploading footage to various social media platforms. Within hours, this would be all over the school, the story spreading and mutating and becoming legend. Sophie appeared at Thaddeus's side, grinning wide. "Holy shit," she said. "That was incredible. You destroyed him without even throwing a punch. I threw him down a couple times. Defense, not offense. There's a difference." She hugged him quickly. "I'm proud of you." That took real courage. Devon and Hannah joined them, both talking excitedly about what they'd witnessed. Iris appeared last, camera still out, capturing the aftermath. Got everything on video, she said. Clear evidence that Connor initiated, that you defended yourself, that he violated the one-on-one agreement by bringing his crew. If there's any blowback, we have proof. There won't be blowback, Sophie predicted. Connor's done. Nobody's going to follow him anymore, and his dad can't save him from social suicide. She was probably right. Connor had gambled everything on this confrontation and lost spectacularly. But Thaddeus felt oddly hollow about the victory. He'd proven he could stand up for himself, yes, but he'd also revealed capabilities he'd been hiding, had used skills he'd hoped never to need again. And now everyone would look at him differently, not as the quiet new kid, but as someone who'd humiliated the school's most prominent bully. "Come on," Iris said, threading her arm through his. "Let's get out of here before your dad hears about this and has a heart attack." But his father already knew. Of course he knew. News travelled fast in schools, especially news this dramatic. Thaddeus found a text message waiting when he checked his phone. "My office. Monday morning. We need to talk." Great. The weekend was surreal. The video of the confrontation went viral within the school's social media ecosystem, accumulating views and shares at a rate that felt simultaneously gratifying and disturbing. Thaddeus's phone buzzed constantly with messages from people he'd never spoken to, some congratulating him, others asking questions, a few making thinly veiled threats on Connor's behalf. He turned off most notifications and tried to pretend life was normal. Saturday, Iris came over. They sat on his back porch, drinking hot chocolate his mother had made, watching leaves fall from the trees. His parents were inside, giving them space while clearly hovering close enough to intervene if needed. "You know this changes things," Iris said, cupping her mug in both hands. "At school. Everyone's going to treat you differently now." "I know. Some people will respect you more. Some will resent you for making Connor look weak. Some will want to be your friend just because you're suddenly interesting." "And you?" Thaddeus asked. "How do you see me now?" Iris considered this seriously. "Same as before. Maybe a little more clearly. I see someone who was pushed into a corner and found a way out that didn't require becoming the thing he was fighting against. That's rare, Thaddeus. Most people in your position would have beaten Connor into the ground. You didn't." "I wanted to," he admitted. "In the moment, part of me really wanted to. But you didn't. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, and Thaddeus felt the weight of the past weeks beginning to lift. The confrontation was over. Connor was no longer a threat. The social dynamics would shift and settle into new patterns. Life would continue, different than before, but perhaps better. "Hey," Iris said, breaking the quiet. "My art show got approved. They're letting me exhibit my photography series. Opening is next Friday. That's amazing. You should come. Bring your parents. I'd like them to meet you in a context that doesn't involve school drama. They'd love that. And Thaddeus, thanks for standing up for me, even though I didn't ask you to. It means something." He smiled, reached over and took her hand. "You're worth standing up for." Monday morning arrived with the inevitable summons to the principal's office. Thaddeus sat in the familiar visitor's chair while his father reviewed what was clearly a detailed report of Friday's incident. Multiple witness statements, video footage, written accounts from staff members who'd monitored the situation from a distance. His father's expression was complicated. Anger, concern, and something that might have been pride all mixed together. "You should have told me," his father said finally, setting down the papers, "about Connor's threats, about the confrontation he was planning. I could have prevented this. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. Because you would have prevented it, and Connor would have found another way to make my life hell, or someone else's life hell. The problem would have just moved, not disappeared." His father rubbed his temples, the gesture familiar from 1,000 stressed evenings. You put yourself at serious risk. Connor could have hurt you. His friends could have intervened despite the one-on-one agreement. Any number of things could have gone wrong. But they didn't. And now Connor doesn't have power over me anymore, over anyone, really. That has value. At what cost? You revealed that you have combat training. Training I didn't know you still practiced, by the way, which makes you look potentially dangerous. Some parents are already calling, worried about whether you're a threat to their children. Thaddeus felt cold anger flash through him. I defended myself against someone who'd been harassing me for weeks, and now I'm the threat. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm telling you how it's being perceived. His father leaned forward, his voice softening. Thaddeus, I understand why you did what you did, and honestly, I'm glad you can defend yourself, but as principal, I have to consider the optics, the precedent, the school's liability. This puts me in an impossible position. So what happens now? Am I being punished? His father sighed heavily. Connor is being suspended for a week. His friends who were clearly planning to participate are being given detention and loss of football privileges. You... He paused, choosing words carefully. You defended yourself appropriately. No disciplinary action. But Thaddeus, if anything like this happens again, it won't. Connor's done. You can't guarantee that. Humiliated people do unpredictable things. Then I'll deal with it if it happens. But I'm not going to live in fear of what might happen. His father studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You've grown up. I'm not sure when that happened, but it did. Just promise me you'll be careful, and that you'll come to me if things escalate beyond what you can handle alone. I promise. Good. Now get to class. And Thaddeus, despite everything, I am proud of you. You showed remarkable restraint in a situation where most people would have lost control. Thaddeus left the office feeling marginally better but still uneasy. His father was right. Humiliated people were unpredictable. Connor might accept defeat and move on, or he might spend the next several months plotting elaborate revenge. Only time would tell. The hallways felt different that Monday. Students who'd previously ignored Thaddeus now nodded as he passed. Some approached to express support or admiration. Others kept their distance, viewing him with new wariness. The social ecosystem was recalibrating around his new position in the hierarchy, no longer the bottom, but not quite the top either. Somewhere in the middle, defined by respect and slight fear in equal measure. At lunch, his regular table had expanded. Sophie, Hannah, and Devon were joined by 3 other students Thaddeus vaguely recognized. Eleanor from chemistry, Marcus, not Connor's Marcus, a different one, from his history class, and Jasmine, who he'd never spoken to, but who apparently wanted to be part of their group now. The table was suddenly crowded, loud, social in ways it hadn't been before. Welcome to being popular, Sophie whispered, as Thaddeus sat down. Everyone wants to be friends with the guy who took down Connor Walsh. I didn't take him down. I just defended myself. Semantics, you're a legend now. Embrace it. But embracing it felt uncomfortable. Thaddeus had never wanted notoriety or social status. He just wanted to be left alone, to exist quietly until graduation. Now he was the center of attention, and every action would be scrutinized, every choice analyzed for meaning. It was exhausting. Iris found him in the library after school, their usual refuge. You look overwhelmed, she observed, dropping into her seat. Everyone wants something from me now. To be my friend, to hear the story, to get close to the drama. It's like I'm not a person anymore, just a character in everyone else's narrative. That's how social capital works. You became valuable, so people want to trade on that value. She paused, then added softly, If it helps, I liked you better when you were nobody. Less complicated. But you still like me now. I like you in spite of all this. There's a difference. They worked in companionable silence, and gradually Thaddeus felt some of the day's tension drain away. This was real. Iris working on her photographs, Thaddeus writing his essay, the quiet partnership they'd built before everything exploded. As long as he could hold on to these moments, maybe the rest was manageable. The week progressed with Connor notably absent, serving his suspension at home. Without his presence, the school felt lighter somehow, like atmospheric pressure had decreased. Jackson and Marcus showed up, but kept their heads down, no longer the intimidating presence they'd been as part of Connor's crew. Other students who'd previously been targets of Connor's cruelty seemed to walk taller, speak louder, occupy space they'd been afraid to claim before. Thaddeus realized that his confrontation with Connor had effects beyond just his own situation. By standing up to the school's primary bully, he demonstrated that resistance was possible, that power dynamics could shift, that victims didn't have to stay victims forever. Several students approached him privately throughout the week to share their own experiences with Connor, to thank him for doing what they'd been too afraid to do themselves. Thursday afternoon, he was leaving the library when he encountered Devon Torres, one of Connor's former crew members. Devon looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, clearly wanting to say something but uncertain how to start. "Hey, Thad," Devon said finally. "Can we talk?" Thaddeus waited, wary. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. I went along with Connor because it was easier than being his target, but that doesn't make it right. You didn't deserve what we put you through." The apology seemed genuine, delivered without excuses or justifications, beyond the simple truth that he'd made cowardly choices. Thaddeus appreciated that. "Thanks for saying that. I don't expect you to forgive me or anything. I just wanted you to know that I know it was wrong." Devon paused. "And if you need anything, like if Connor comes after you again or whatever, I've got your back. For real this time." "I appreciate that." Devon nodded and walked away, leaving Thaddeus standing in the hallway processing the interaction. People were capable of change, apparently. Given the right circumstances, even enablers and followers could recognize their complicity and choose differently. It was a small hope, but hope nonetheless. Friday brought Iris's art show opening, held in the school's gallery space adjacent to the library. Her photography series was stunning. Images of people wearing various masks, theatrical, medical, metaphorical, juxtaposed with candid shots showing their real expressions. The commentary on identity and social performance was clear and powerful, made more impactful by the timing coming so soon after the confrontation with Connor. Thaddeus's parents attended, dressed nicely and clearly making an effort to be supportive. They met Iris, shook her hand, complimented her work with what seemed like genuine appreciation. His mother pulled him aside at one point, smiled warmly. "She's lovely," she said. "Smart, talented, sees you clearly, I approve. We've been on like 2 dates. Sometimes 2 dates is enough to know something has potential." She squeezed his arm. "I'm glad you're finding good people here. Real friends." Sophie and her crew showed up, as did several other students from various social circles. The turnout was impressive, the gallery crowded and loud in the best way. Iris glowed, surrounded by people admiring her work, answering questions about her process and vision. Thaddeus watched her from across the room and felt something warm settle in his chest. Pride in her accomplishment, joy in her happiness, gratitude that she'd chosen to let him into her life. The following Monday, Connor returned to school. Thaddeus saw him first in the parking lot, getting out of a car that was probably worth more than a year of his father's salary. Connor looked smaller somehow, diminished not physically but in presence and confidence. He walked through the school entrance with his shoulders hunched, eyes down, actively avoiding attention rather than commanding it. The transformation was remarkable. Students who would have scrambled to greet him before now simply moved past without acknowledgement. His former crew, Jackson, Marcus, Devon, the others, didn't even glance his way. He was socially invisible, irrelevant, erased from the hierarchy he'd once dominated. Thaddeus felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. At lunch, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He approached the table where Connor sat alone in the far corner of the cafeteria, claimed the seat across from him without invitation. Connor looked up, startled and wary. "What do you want?" "To talk. Haven't you done enough? You destroyed my reputation, took away my friends, made me a joke. What more could you possibly want?" "I don't want anything. I just thought maybe we should actually talk. Really talk. Without threats or posturing or performance." Connor stared at him suspiciously. "Why would I do that?" "Because the alternative is spending the rest of the year as a social outcast, bitter and angry, plotting revenge that'll just make things worse. Or you could use this as an opportunity to figure out why you became the person you were, and whether that's who you want to continue being. You think it's that simple? Just decide to be different and everything's fine? No. I think it's incredibly hard and probably takes years and you'll mess up constantly, but the alternative is being Connor Walsh, the bully forever, and that seems like a pretty miserable existence." Connor was quiet for a long moment, picking at the food on his tray without eating. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "My dad expects certain things, top grades, sports success, social dominance. He grew up poor, worked his way up to partner at the firm, and now he wants his son to have all the things he didn't, which means I'm supposed to be perfect, and when you're supposed to be perfect, you can't show weakness, can't admit doubt, can't let anyone think they can push you around." He laughed bitterly. "So I pushed everyone else around instead. That's not an excuse." "I know it's not. I'm not trying to excuse what I did. I'm just explaining the logic, twisted as it was." Connor met Thaddeus's eyes directly for the first time. "You're right that I'm bitter and angry, and part of me does want revenge, but mostly I'm just tired. Maintaining that whole persona was exhausting, and now that it's gone, I almost feel relieved." "So what happens now?" "I don't know. Finish the year. Try not to make more enemies. Graduate and get the hell out of here. Start over somewhere that doesn't know Connor Walsh the bully. Or you could start over here. Prove you're capable of change." Connor shook his head. "That's not how it works. Social capital doesn't rebuild once it's destroyed. I'll always be the guy you humiliated in front of the whole school. Only if you let that define you. You could be the guy who learned from his mistakes and became better. People respect growth and change. In movies, maybe. In real life, people just want to see you stay in the role they've assigned you." Connor pushed his tray away, stood up. "But thanks for trying. I appreciate the sentiment even if I don't believe it." He walked away, and Thaddeus watched him go, unsure whether he'd made any impact or just wasted his time. Probably a bit of both. Sophie appeared, sliding into the seat Connor had vacated. "That was unexpectedly noble of you, trying to rehabilitate your nemesis. He's not my nemesis. He's just a sad kid with bad coping mechanisms. Still, not everyone would extend that olive branch. Maybe they should. How many Connors are out there because nobody ever gave them a better option?" Sophie considered this thoughtfully. "You know, you're kind of wise for someone our age. It's slightly annoying. I contain multitudes." The rest of the week passed quietly, settling into patterns that felt sustainable. Connor kept to himself, avoiding confrontation and attention in equal measure. Thaddeus continued building friendships with Sophie's group, spending afternoons with Iris, managing the careful balance of being the principal's son while still being seen as an individual. His father relaxed incrementally as the drama faded and no new crises emerged. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. Thaddeus was at his locker when a younger student, maybe a freshman, definitely intimidated, approached hesitantly. "Are you Thaddeus?" the kid asked. "Yeah. There's this guy, a senior named Brett, who's been giving me trouble, taking my lunch money, pushing me around, the usual. I heard what you did with Connor Walsh, and I was wondering if maybe you could—" He trailed off, uncertain. Thaddeus felt the weight of the request settle on his shoulders. This was the consequence of his actions. He'd positioned himself as someone who stood up to bullies, which meant people would now come to him, expecting him to continue doing so. It was a responsibility he hadn't anticipated and wasn't entirely sure he wanted. "Where does this happen?" Thaddeus asked. The kid's face brightened with hope. "Usually by the north bathrooms, between 4th and 5th period." "Okay, I'll be there tomorrow. What's your name?" "Kevin Martinez." "Kevin, here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow, when Brett approaches you, you stand your ground. Tell him no, clearly and firmly. I'll be nearby in case things escalate, but you need to be the one who stands up for yourself first. Can you do that?" Kevin looked terrified but nodded. "I think so." "Good. Because the goal isn't for me to solve this for you. It's for you to learn you can solve it yourself, with backup if necessary. Make sense?" "Yeah. Thanks, Thaddeus." The next day, Thaddeus positioned himself near the north bathrooms during the transition between 4th and 5th period. He watched as Kevin emerged from class as a larger student, presumably Brett, intercepted him as the familiar dance of intimidation began. But this time, Kevin spoke up. His voice shook, but he said clearly, "No, you don't get to take my money anymore." Brett laughed. "What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to report you. And my friend Thaddeus is going to back me up." Brett followed Kevin's gesture to where Thaddeus stood leaning against the lockers, clearly visible and clearly paying attention. Recognition dawned on Brett's face. He knew who Thaddeus was, what he'd done to Connor Walsh, and his entire demeanor shifted. "Whatever," Brett muttered, backing off. "Not worth the trouble." He walked away, and Kevin looked at Thaddeus with an expression of pure amazement. Thaddeus nodded once, then continued to his own class. A small victory, barely worth noting in the grand scheme of things, but to Kevin, it was probably everything. Similar incidents occurred over the following weeks. Students being harassed would seek out Thaddeus, would ask for help or advice, or simply his presence as deterrent. He began developing a reputation not as a fighter, but as someone willing to intervene, to stand with people who couldn't stand alone, to use his social capital for something useful. His father noticed, of course. "I'm hearing interesting reports about you," his father said one evening over dinner. "Students say you've been helping with bullying situations." Acting as an informal mediator. Someone has to. That's what we have counselors and administrators for. And how often do students actually use those resources? Most kids would rather suffer than be labeled a snitch or deal with the bureaucracy of official complaints. His father couldn't argue with that logic. Just be careful. You're not trained for this kind of intervention, and you could find yourself in dangerous situations. I'm careful. And I'm not trying to be a vigilante or anything. I just make my presence known, let bullies know their actions have witnesses, and help victims find their own courage. That's it. His mother smiled warmly. You're a good kid, Thaddeus. We raised you right. You both did the best you could with the material you had to work with. They laughed, and dinner continued with comfortable conversation about classes and college applications and plans for Thanksgiving break. Normal family stuff, the kind of mundane interaction that felt precious after months of stress and drama. November became December, the weather turning cold and snow beginning to accumulate. Lincoln High prepared for winter break with the distracted energy of students counting down days. Thaddeus found himself looking forward to the break less for the rest, and more because it would give him time to process everything that had happened since August. He'd arrived as the invisible new kid, desperate to avoid attention and conflict. He was leaving the first semester as someone known throughout the school, respected by some, resented by others, but certainly not invisible. The transformation felt both inevitable and impossible, like he'd been pushed along a path he couldn't have predicted or avoided. On the last day before break, Iris suggested they take a walk through the snow-covered downtown area, see the holiday lights, just exist together without agenda or purpose. They bundled up against the cold and wandered through streets decorated with lights and garland, watching families shop and couples date and life continue around them in all its messy complexity. "What are you thinking about?" Iris asked as they stood watching the window displays at a closed bookstore. "How different things are now compared to September, how I'm different." "Are you happy with how things turned out?" Thaddeus considered this honestly. Not happy exactly, but satisfied maybe. "I didn't want to be notable or involved in drama or positioned as some kind of anti-bullying crusader. But if those are the consequences of standing up for myself and helping other people do the same, I can live with them. It's very mature and well-adjusted of you." "Don't sound so surprised," she laughed, linking her arm through his. "I'm not surprised. You've always been mature and well-adjusted, even when you were pretending to be invisible. It's one of the things I like about you." "Just one of them." "Oh, there are many things. Your terrible sense of humor, your tendency to overthink everything, the way you genuinely listen when people talk instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. The list goes on. You make me sound like a paragon of virtue. You're not perfect. You're stubborn and sometimes too self-reliant, and you have this martyr complex where you think you have to fix everything yourself. But your virtues outweigh your flaws by a significant margin." They walked in comfortable silence, and Thaddeus realized how grateful he was for Iris. She saw him clearly, without illusions or projections, and chose to be with him anyway. That felt like a minor miracle. Christmas break passed in a blur of family time, college applications and video calls with Iris, who was visiting relatives in California. Thaddeus helped his father organize files for the second semester, helped his mother redecorate the living room, and generally existed in the peaceful routine of home life. It felt good to be away from the pressure of school, to reset and recharge. The new semester began in January with a different energy. Students returned with fresh perspectives, social dynamics that had solidified over the break, and the understanding that graduation was approaching for the seniors. Thaddeus settled into advanced classes, continued his informal role as someone students could approach for help with bullying situations, and deepened his relationship with Iris. Connor remained peripheral, a shadow of his former self. Thaddeus occasionally saw him in hallways or classes, always alone, always quiet. They didn't speak much after that initial conversation in the cafeteria, but there was a mutual acknowledgement between them. Not friendship, but understanding. Connor seemed to be genuinely trying to be different, to exist without needing to dominate or intimidate. Whether that change would stick beyond high school remained to be seen. One afternoon in late January, Thaddeus was in the library when his father appeared, which was unusual enough to be concerning. "Can we talk?" his father asked, gesturing toward a private study room. Inside, his father closed the door and sat down heavily. "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." Thaddeus felt his stomach drop. "What happened?" "Mitchell Walsh, Connor's father, has filed a formal complaint against you, claims you assaulted his son, traumatized him, created a hostile environment that's impacted Connor's academic performance and mental health. He's threatening a lawsuit against the school district and demanding either your expulsion or my resignation." The words landed like physical blows. "That's ridiculous. There's video evidence that Connor initiated everything, dozens of witnesses who saw exactly what happened. I know, and the school board knows. But Walsh is a powerful attorney with connections throughout the county. He's applying pressure in ways that are hard to counter directly. So what happens now? His father rubbed his face tiredly. There's going to be a formal investigation. Interviews with witnesses, review of all evidence, the whole process. It'll take a few weeks. During that time, you need to keep your head down, avoid any situations that could be misconstrued, and definitely don't engage with Connor or his family in any way. This is insane. He's retaliating because Connor lost. Welcome to adult politics disguised as protecting children. Walsh doesn't actually care about Connor's well-being. This is about saving face and maintaining his own reputation. If his son got humiliated at school, it reflects on his parenting, his family, his image, so he's weaponizing the legal system to rewrite the narrative. Thaddeus felt rage burning in his throat, hot and acidic. Everything he'd done had been self-defense, necessary protection against sustained harassment, and now he was being punished for it because Connor's father had money and influence. This isn't fair. No, it's not. But fair and legal aren't always the same thing. We'll fight this, and we'll win because the evidence is on our side, but it's going to be unpleasant, and you need to be prepared for that. The investigation began the following Monday. Thaddeus was pulled out of classes for interviews with district administrators, forced to recount the entire sequence of events multiple times to different people who all asked the same questions with slight variations. Sophie, Hannah, Devon, and Iris were all interviewed as well, along with dozens of other students who'd witnessed the confrontation or been aware of Connor's harassment. The process was exhausting and humiliating. Thaddeus felt like he was on trial for defending himself, like his actions were being dissected and judged by people who hadn't experienced what he'd experienced. The worst part was maintaining normal school life while knowing that his entire future potentially hung on the outcome of this investigation. Connor, for his part, seemed genuinely distressed by his father's actions. Thaddeus caught him after school one day, pulled him aside for a brief conversation. "Did you ask your dad to do this?" Thaddeus asked directly. "No," Connor said, and he sounded sincere. "I told him what happened, tried to explain that I started it, that you just defended yourself." He didn't care. He just kept saying the Walsh family doesn't lose, doesn't look weak, doesn't let people get away with disrespecting us. So stop him. Tell the investigators the truth. I did tell them the truth. They interviewed me for 2 hours. I told them everything, about harassing you, about planning the confrontation, about how you had every right to defend yourself. But my dad's lawyers are going to contradict all of that. Claim I'm suffering from trauma and Stockholm Syndrome or some shit. They're going to paint you as a violent predator and me as a helpless victim. And you're okay with that? Connor looked miserable. No. But I don't get a vote. I'm just a prop in my father's reputation management strategy. Thaddeus felt the anger drain away, replaced by tired frustration. Connor was as trapped as he was, just in different ways. They were both being used by an adult with power and no concern for collateral damage. "For what it's worth," Connor said quietly, "I'm sorry. For all of it, the harassment, the fight, and now this. You didn't deserve any of it. Thanks." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, then went their separate ways. Two people who should have been enemies, but were instead just casualties of circumstance and other people's ambitions. The investigation concluded in mid-February with a finding that vindicated Thaddeus completely. The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage showed Connor initiating physical contact. Witness testimony confirmed sustained harassment prior to the confrontation, and even Connor's own statement acknowledged his responsibility. The district's legal team prepared a comprehensive response to Walsh's threatened lawsuit, making it clear that pursuing legal action would result in embarrassing public disclosure of evidence that would destroy Connor's reputation further. Mitchell Walsh, recognizing he was outmaneuvered, withdrew his complaint with a face-saving statement about prioritizing his son's recovery over continued conflict. The lawsuit threat evaporated. The investigation was closed. Thaddeus was officially cleared of all wrongdoing. His father delivered the news in person, relief evident in his expression. "It's over. You're in the clear. Walsh won't pursue this further." Thaddeus should have felt triumphant. Instead, he just felt tired. "Great. You don't seem happy. I'm glad it's resolved. But the fact that it happened at all, that I had to go through weeks of investigation because a rich lawyer decided to abuse the system to protect his son's ego, that's not something to celebrate." His father nodded slowly. "You're learning harsh lessons about how the world works. I wish you didn't have to learn them so young. At least, I'm learning them in a relatively safe environment. With backup." That evening, Iris came over for dinner, the first time she'd been invited for a formal meal with his parents. His mother cooked an elaborate spread, clearly trying to impress, while his father attempted to be casually welcoming without slipping into principal mode. It was endearingly awkward, and Iris handled it with grace and humor. "So," his mother said during dessert, "how did you and Thaddeus meet?" "We were both hiding in the library," Iris said, smiling at him, "avoiding the social chaos of high school cafeterias. Turns out isolation is more fun with company. And now you're dating. Now we're dating. He's surprisingly good boyfriend material once you get past the brooding loner thing." "I don't brood," Thaddeus protested. "You absolutely brood. You brood like it's an Olympic sport." His parents laughed, and the rest of dinner passed with easy conversation. Afterward, Thaddeus walked Iris to her car, both of them bundled against the February cold. "Your parents are nice," Iris observed. "Very clearly love you and worry about you constantly. That's pretty much their default state. It's sweet. My parents are great too, but they're much more hands-off. Yours are involved in a good way. Even when my dad's involvement creates complications. Especially then. He's trying to do right by you and by the school. That's not easy." They stood by her car, breath fogging in the cold air, and Thaddeus felt grateful for everything, for Iris, for his parents, for friends who'd stood by him through the investigation, for a school system that had ultimately prioritized truth over politics. He'd been lucky in ways he was only beginning to appreciate. "I'm glad I moved here," he said suddenly. Iris raised an eyebrow. "Really? Even with all the drama and bullying and investigation nonsense?" "Even with that. Because I met you, and Sophie and the others, and I learned things about myself I wouldn't have learned otherwise." "Like what?" "Like I'm stronger than I thought I was. Like standing up for yourself is worth the cost. Like sometimes the hard path is the right one, even when there are easier options available." Iris kissed him softly, then pulled back with a smile. "You're definitely brooding right now. But it's a productive brood, so I'll allow it." She drove away, and Thaddeus went back inside, where his parents were cleaning up the kitchen and talking quietly. His father saw him come in, smiled. "She's good for you," he said. "I know. And you've handled everything this year with real maturity. I know it hasn't been easy, but you should be proud of how you've navigated it." "Thanks, Dad. I mean it. Not every kid in your position would have made the choices you made. You could have used your connection to me to avoid problems or gain advantages. Instead, you tried to stand on your own merit. That says something about your character." Thaddeus felt warmth spread through his chest, the simple pleasure of parental approval. "I learned from the best." His father pulled him into a hug, tight and warm, and for a moment Thaddeus was just a kid being hugged by his dad, without complications or considerations beyond that simple human connection. The rest of the school year passed more smoothly. Spring arrived with the messy beauty of melting snow and emerging green. Thaddeus continued his informal role, helping students deal with bullying situations, building a reputation as someone safe to approach for help. The school's administration, recognizing the value of this peer support system, officially created a program with Thaddeus as the founding member, a student-led anti-bullying initiative that would continue after he graduated. Connor finished the year quietly, his transformation from dominant bully to invisible student complete. He and Thaddeus never became friends, but they achieved something perhaps more valuable, a mutual respect born from understanding that people were capable of change if given the opportunity. On the last day of school, Connor approached Thaddeus at his locker. "Hey," Connor said, "I'm going to a different college than I planned. Farther from home. Somewhere my dad's reputation doesn't reach." "That's probably good." "Yeah. I'm going to try to be different there. Actually different, not just performing difference. Your whole thing about starting over, about choosing who you want to be. I've been thinking about that. I hope it works out for you." "Me too." Connor extended his hand for a handshake. "Thanks for not destroying me completely when you had the chance. I know I didn't deserve mercy, but I'm grateful for it anyway." Thaddeus shook his hand. "Everyone deserves a chance to be better. Whether we take that chance is up to us." Connor nodded and walked away, and Thaddeus watched him go, hoping that the lesson would stick, that Connor would find his own path to being someone he could respect. It wasn't Thaddeus's responsibility to fix Connor, or save him, or ensure his redemption, but he could hope anyway. Graduation came with all the traditional ceremony and emotion. Thaddeus walked across the stage in his cap and gown, accepted his diploma from his father in front of hundreds of people, and felt the weight of the past year crystallize into something meaningful. He'd survived, he'd grown, he'd made a difference, however small, in the ecosystem of the school. At the graduation party his parents hosted afterward, surrounded by Sophie, Hannah, Devon, Iris, and a dozen other friends he'd accumulated, Thaddeus looked around and felt profound gratitude. These were his people, the ones who'd stood by him through everything, who'd seen him at his worst and liked him anyway. This was what made the struggle worthwhile. These connections, these moments of genuine human warmth in a world that could be cold and cruel. "Speech," Sophie called out, raising her glass. "The graduate should make a speech." "No speeches," Thaddeus protested, but everyone was chanting now, laughing and insistent. He stood reluctantly, raised his own glass. "Okay, fine, brief speech. This year was complicated. I came to Lincoln High hoping to be invisible, to just get through senior year without drama or complications. Instead, I got all the drama and complications. But I also got you guys, real friends who actually gave a damn, who stood up when it mattered, who taught me that community was worth fighting for. So thanks for that. And thanks for not letting me stay invisible even when I wanted to." "Eloquent," Iris said dryly. "Really moving. I'm a work in progress. Aren't we all?" They raised their glasses, toasted to new beginnings and hard-won lessons, and Thaddeus felt the future opening before him with possibility. College in the fall, a new city, another fresh start, but this time with the knowledge that he could handle whatever came, that invisibility wasn't safety, that standing up for yourself was worth the cost. Late that night, after everyone had left and his parents had gone to bed, Thaddeus stood in the backyard, looking up at stars, visible between clouds. Summer was coming, full of promise and uncertainty. He'd be leaving Ohio soon, heading to university in a different state, starting the next chapter of a life that was still being written. His phone buzzed with a text from Iris. "Today was good. You did good. Proud of you." He smiled, typed back, "Couldn't have done it without you." "I know," she responded immediately, "but you did it anyway." That's what matters. She was right. He had done it. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but genuinely and with intention. He'd faced his fears, stood his ground, helped others find their own strength, and in the process, he'd become someone he could respect. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of growing things and distant rain. Thaddeus breathed deeply, let the moment settle into memory, and then went inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to choose who he wanted to be. But tonight he could rest. Tonight he was enough exactly as he was. And that, finally, was what he'd been searching for all along. Not victory or vindication or social capital, but the simple knowledge that he was enough, that he could handle what life threw at him, that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. He'd learned that lesson in the hardest possible way, through confrontation and conflict and weeks of uncertainty, but he'd learned it. As he climbed the stairs to his room, he passed his father's study, saw the light still on underneath the door. He knocked softly, poked his head in. "You should be in bed," Thaddeus said. His father looked up from the paperwork spread across his desk, smiled tiredly. "Could say the same to you. I'm heading there now. Just wanted to say thanks for everything this year, for letting me handle things my way even when it probably made you crazy. It definitely made me crazy, but you earned that autonomy. You proved you could handle it. I had help. You and Mom, Iris, my friends. I didn't do it alone. No one does anything truly important alone. That's not weakness, that's wisdom." Thaddeus nodded, understanding the truth of it. "Good night, Dad." "Good night, son. I'm proud of you." The words carried him up the rest of the stairs, through his nighttime routine, into bed where sleep came easily despite the eventful day. His last thought before drifting off was simple and profound. He'd made it. Despite everything, he'd made it through, and in the end, that was the real victory. Not defeating Connor, not avoiding his father's authority, not becoming popular or respected, or any of the external measures people use to judge success. The real victory was making it through intact, with his humanity and compassion and sense of self preserved. That was what would carry him forward into whatever came next. Outside his window, the world continued its slow revolution. Stars wheeled overhead, the wind moved through trees, life persisted in all its messy, complicated glory, and Thaddeus Merrick, former invisible new kid, current graduate, future, whatever he chose to become, slept peacefully, knowing that he was ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Because he'd learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength wasn't about dominating others or avoiding conflict or hiding from challenges. True strength was standing up when it mattered, asking for help when you needed it, showing mercy when you had the power to inflict harm, and choosing every single day to be better than your circumstances demanded. That was the lesson he'd take with him to college, into adulthood, through whatever trials and triumphs awaited. And that was the lesson he hoped others would learn too, that change was possible, that courage was contagious, that one person standing up could shift entire social ecosystems if they were willing to endure the discomfort of being seen. The story could have ended differently. Connor could have seriously injured him. His father could have lost his job. The investigation could have gone against him. Any number of things could have gone catastrophically wrong. But they hadn't, and Thaddeus was learning to be grateful for luck as much as effort, for timing as much as courage, for the countless small factors that determined whether someone succeeded or failed in their attempts to make the world slightly less cruel. These were complicated thoughts for late at night, but Thaddeus had always been prone to overthinking, to analyzing and dissecting experience until he extracted every possible lesson. It was exhausting sometimes, this constant self-examination. But it was also how he grew, how he learned, how he transformed from who he'd been into who he was becoming. And who was he becoming? That was still unclear, but he was becoming someone who stood up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves, someone who showed mercy when vengeance would have been easier, someone who believed in the possibility of change even when evidence suggested otherwise, someone who'd rather be kind than comfortable, principled than popular, genuine than performative. That person felt worth being. That person felt like someone he could respect in the mirror. And after a year of doubt and fear and constant anxiety, that certainty was a gift he hadn't expected, but would treasure anyway. The clock on his nightstand glowed softly in the darkness. 2:47 a.m. He should have been asleep hours ago, but his mind was restless with reflections and realizations, processing the entire year in the quiet space between day and dreams. Eventually, exhaustion would win, would pull him under into proper sleep. But for now, he lay there, thinking, feeling, understanding. And when sleep finally came, it was deep and dreamless and restorative, the kind of sleep that prepared someone for new beginnings. When morning arrived, Thaddeus would wake to the first day of summer, to freedom from school schedules and social hierarchies, to months of possibility before college began. But tonight, in this liminal space, he was simply himself, flawed and growing, scared and brave, alone and supported, becoming and being. That was enough. That would always be enough.